We are live, guys, and this is Happy Smarts Happy Hour. Welcome to the 15th edition of it. It's unbelievable. We started on a bit of a whim, but it took a life of its own, and here we are about 4 months later with our guest, Vic Strecher from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, who's got a wonderful course on Coursera on purpose. And really, it's that course that has brought Vic on the Happy Spots Happy Hour. So the story is that Elena, of course, everyone's favorite, right, on the show, she took that course and she loved it so much that she recommended the course to me and, recommended Vic to be a guest on the show. And I contacted him after that, and that's how he's here. And we have Isabel, who's saying she's very excited because she says, perfect timing, as I've just started his online course, Vic. So your online course. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to drop Gayatri, who's been, here with us for the last session 2, and she's going to ask the questions that you guys pose. Hi, John. Hi, Driss. And Gayatri will get you back in about 40 minutes. Okay. All right, here we go. So, Elena, do you mind being center stage?
Oh, well, I don't mind, but
there you are.
You can put Vic in the middle.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to remove you and bring you back up. Let's see if that works. Okay, and I bring you back up there.
Oh, yeah, great.
Okay.
Wow, technology.
All right, Vic, thank you again so much for coming here. And we were just talking before we went live, and Elena was saying, I think that the reason why she really wanted you on the show and she's so excited is because you're such a kind person. Okay, so Elena, how did you make that, inference that he's a kind person?
Hard to explain.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain because we've never met in person, but from the first videos, you were explaining eudaimonic happiness and hedonic happiness, and I really loved all those explanations, and you were sharing a personal story, and I felt like I had probably met you in my past life. It was like, so, as if it was not via screen, but it was like real, and so I felt the energy, very, very positive, very kind-hearted. And so I thought, this is a very good person, that's what I felt, a very good person. And I thought, probably I would like more people to hear you and, not just via course, but maybe here with us also live. And that's why I had to just tell Raj about you and invite you here.
Well, you're very kind to say that, Elena. Thank you so much. And I'm really pleased to be here.
Okay, wonderful. So you said that he shared his personal story on the course. And so let's start with the personal story. And so we're going to start with a bit of a bang and dive right in and take quite a deep dive. So on the 2nd of March in 2010, Vic, something monumental happened in your life, something tragic happened. Can you just tell us what happened and how?
Happy to. Yeah, and it's pretty recent, the anniversary of the 10-year anniversary of my 19-year-old daughter passing away. Her name was Julia, and she was born healthy, but we were on sabbatical in the Netherlands. I was doing research in the Netherlands in the southern part called Maastricht, and we brought our older daughter, Rachel, and our younger daughter, Julia, who was just 6 months old, and she started losing weight, and which it shouldn't happen typically with a baby. And so we brought her in, and we kept having to bring her back, and they couldn't figure it out. Finally, they found that her heart had dilated, had expanded to about twice the size. She caught a chickenpox virus out of the blue, which everybody gets, or most people get, and then they get a fever and a rash for a couple days. Babies get this and then it goes away. But unfortunately, this virus attacked her heart and destroyed her heart, and her only chance of getting any type of life at all. She was going to, in fact, they said she'll be dead within the next month to 3 months. And they said, we took her back to the United States, and they said, well, the only chance would be to get a heart transplant. And of course, this kind of rocks your life when you're an assistant professor and things are going well and you're publishing and you're writing grants and you're teaching and you're doing all this stuff, and life is normal and consistent, and you're expecting to go out and then play more golf as you get older or whatever. Suddenly, our daughter was going through this horrific thing. And the first question we asked was whether we should even list her for a new heart, because I learned that half of the kids waiting for a heart didn't even get one. They died before they received one. And then 50% of the children who got a new heart failed to even live for the first 5 years. So her chance of living to become 5 years old it was about 25%. So we thought it's pretty likely that she would not live to be 5. And so we had to ask ourselves, should we put her through all of this trouble and pain and craziness, or just let her pass away? And, as you might expect if you've had children yourself, it's really impossible to do that. We couldn't just say, no, we're going to let her die. So we tried to do this, but we thought, if we could give her a big life, if we could, and then we started asking around our dinner table, our gathering place where we stop and we eat, but we not only eat, but we talk about our day and we talk about our lives. And here suddenly we're talking about, what a big life meant. And these are conversations that I wasn't used to having. As a scientist, it's not something that I was thinking about. So anyway, she ended up becoming one of the first people to get a heart. It's kind of a miracle in many ways. She ended up living a very big life. And we define big life as something that would be a life with purpose, with some meaning, a life that has love in it, that has connections, that also allows her to have agency, that she starts feeling like she can control her environment. We thought that was very important. So we started defining these steps. And then when she was about 17, she said, I want to give back. I would like to be a nurse. So she went to the University of Michigan to nursing school when she graduated from high school. And she was starting to get a little tired. And she was working very hard in nursing school. We took her and our older daughter to the Caribbean for spring break. It's very cold in Michigan, not like Texas. And we were eating out on the gathering place, only it was on the beach. And when she was going back to her room, she said, the third night in, she said, I'm so happy now that I could die. And those were her last words.
Wow.
That she, and that's interesting too, she never woke up that next morning. And she just suffered a massive heart attack. And when that happened, of course, our world was rocked again. And I kind of lost my purpose in my life. I thought, wow, I'm just going to, I don't care if I live. And so that was a very important time for me, because this is on March 2nd of 2010. And we went to a grief counselor. I remember my wife and I went to a grief counselor, and I remember being a professor, I was kind of, well, I know about grief and I know about people who lose their children. And I said, 80% of parents who lose their children get a divorce, they break up. I said to this grief counselor, and she is also a marital counselor. And she kind of laughed and she said, well, you're right, Vic, but you know what? 50% of couples break up anyway. Oh yeah, I guess so. You're right. I didn't even think about that.
At least in the US, right? I think the percentage is a little bit lower in India, I believe.
I think you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I thought, yeah, I suppose that's true. But then she said, but if you judge how the other person is grieving, if you say, oh, you're grieving too much, or you're grieving too little, or whatever, you will break up. If you start judging your partner, what you have to do, she said, is you have to support the other person, but support them on their own journey, because they'll go on a private, personal, deeply personal journey. And that journey will be different for different people. So my wife, who's an artist and gardener, she was doing her artwork and gardening, and I went to northern Michigan. And I'm in northern Michigan right now, right on Lake Michigan. It's I can even show you a picture in a minute if you want. And I just simply started eating and drinking myself to death. I just I wasn't trying to die.
Just alcohol? You were just
didn't care.
Okay.
I just was drinking, alcohol. And
if you don't mind me asking, how many drinks?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Sometimes I would just go on a binge, and it didn't matter. I might just watch whatever's on TV. like what is Kim Kardashian on, you know? And that's a true sign that you're getting ready to die, you know, if you're just watching whatever she's on. You know, it's just, I'm not saying, I'm sure she's a nice person. It's just, I didn't care what I was watching. I would watch any type of reality show or stupid things, and I would just drink. I'd drink, you know, hard liquor, bourbon or whatever. And then I'd find myself asleep on the sofa, you know, completely drunk, and I didn't care. And then a friend of mine sent me a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Victor Frankl. And Victor Frankl had gone through 3 concentration camps. And he saw prisoners all around him dying. But he also found people living, and not only living, but even thriving. And those prisoners who were thriving tended to maintain or even build a purpose in their lives. And they were transcending. They would give their food to new prisoners, saying, you're going to need this more than me. And it turns out those people who did that, who gave their food, were more likely to live then. So people who were thinking in this transcending way ended up doing much better. And he also found that his experiences that he went through led to growth in his life, not necessarily trauma, or maybe it was a combination of trauma and growth. But it was impressive that people could actually grow from such a negative experience. So he talked a lot about purpose. He talked about transcendence. And I started thinking, well, I've never done any research in this. This is 10 years ago. And so I started learning more about it. And I also started learning about ancient philosophers who talked about purpose, people like Aristotle. Socrates once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. But Aristotle said, yeah, you're right, Socrates, but essentially the purposeless life isn't worth examining in the first place. So it's really important. You know, it's 2 sides of a coin. Examine your life, study your life, but at the same time, study a life that has purpose and think about what kind of purpose or direction and goals you might have in your life. So I started reading more about this. I started reading poets like Rumi, ancient Persian poet. And it started changing my life. And one morning I woke up. It was at 5:15 in the morning, and I'd had a dream with my daughter Julia in it. And it was a very, very vivid dream where I did not want to go back. I wanted to stay asleep because I was talking to her, and it was a very powerful dream. And I suddenly woke up, and I had read a poem by Rumi the night before saying, the dreams at night have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. So it was a phrase that I remembered, and I thought, wow, I want to go back to sleep, but I'm not going to. And I jumped in a kayak that I have on the beach, and I took off into Lake Michigan at 5:15 in the morning, and I just started paddling as hard as I could. And can I show you Lake Michigan?
Sure, yeah, please.
Okay, let's see if this works. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so that's where I am.
So beautiful.
Yeah, so I hopped in this kayak on Lake Michigan, and I just started paddling as hard as I could. I went out at least 2 miles. I was way out, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just, it was so beautiful and the water was so calm, I thought maybe I'll just paddle to Wisconsin, the other side of Lake Michigan, which was 86 more miles. Of course, I never would have made it, but I didn't care. And then I saw the sun come up. And this is a totally true story. I saw the sun come up, and I felt my daughter in me. And I don't know how else to describe that, but I felt Julia in me. And she was saying, you've got to get over this, Dad. And it wasn't like you have to get over this. It was like you have to get over yourself. You have to get over your grief. You have to get over your ego and start living for what matters most. And I get a little emotional even thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm getting emotional, honestly, you know.
But when so I decided I was at the crossroads in my life. I had a choice. I could continue on and paddle to Wisconsin. It was a beautiful morning, and I didn't care. I just was loving the paddling. I loved the time I was out there, and I thought I could just keep going, knowing I would not make it. Or I could go back, but I knew if I were to go back, I'd have to change my life. And so I did. I went back, and And the University of Michigan had said, well, you lost your daughter, so that's a horrible thing. You don't have to teach this semester or even next semester. Take up as much time as you want. And I realized that, as well-meaning as that was terrible advice for me. And I called the university that morning, and I said, I'd actually like to teach as soon as possible, and I'm going to teach every student as if they're my own daughter, Julia. And so that's what I did. And it turns out that day, I was by myself for over a month, which is not good, but I was by myself while my wife was down in Ann Arbor. And it was Father's Day, it turns out. And I didn't even know that. And so that was Julia's gift to me.
My goodness.
So since then, I've decided to have a different life and study the science of purpose in life, having a strong purpose, which turns out to be amazingly good for people for many reasons.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I really am happy to. Yeah. And while I may get emotional about it a little bit, it's also, it's just fine. I don't mind at all.
Okay. By the way, guys, those who are watching this, please do type in your questions. And I might have even forgotten to welcome you. Just dove right in. Really sorry about that. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us from various parts of the world. And we have, for those who came in late, Vic Strecher with us from the University of Michigan. He's just shared with us the story of his daughter's passing about 10 years back and how it changed his life and how he went through this roller coaster of emotions and experiences, talking about a big life. I mean, I don't think it gets bigger than this. And that's not necessarily in a good way, in the sense that you don't want these kind of experiences in your life. But if you do have them, then I imagine that the best possible outcome after that is that you do find your purpose. So, let me ask you a couple of things, Vic, if you don't mind, kind of extending this a little more in the kind of personal realm of things. How did, if you don't mind, again, I mean, please feel free to not answer this question, but how did your rest of your family take it? Your wife and daughter, what was their journey?
Well, everybody responds to something like this differently. And I think mothers respond to loss of a child in an even deeper way. Yeah. It's hard to imagine, but I think that's very true. There's something that's so fully connected between a mother and a child. And so this certainly affected her a great deal, and it still does. We talk about it regularly. But the thing is, it's not all bad. That's the funny part about loss. You change as a human, and I think she has changed. My wife has changed in many ways. She is very, very attached to the children's hospital that Julia had gone to at the University of Michigan. So helps a lot of people, parents, mothers who have kids who are very sick. And in fact, she really is super helpful for people at the hospital and does things like that. And then my daughter Rachel, is quite amazing. I think she took some of these experiences and it made her a much, much deeper, richer person. But, she grew up with a child who was chronically ill, with a heart transplant. You're immune suppressed, you're getting sick all the time. So much attention is paid to Julia that often our older daughter, Rachel, was kind of left to the side a little bit. So she had to manage a lot of things on her own, and she became a very independent person. She now works for the National Geographic, and she's the director of storytelling for the National Geographic. And she has this amazing job. She has a job I want. She runs around the world. In fact, she was in Hyderabad this last year, but she was also in Cambodia and Siem Reap. She was in Italy. She goes all over the world and gives out money to storytellers for the National Geographic. And she goes to various conferences, or she meets amazing, photojournalists or other people around things like human migration, climate change, and other world issues. And she's the director for that. She has a beautiful family of 2 children, and her older daughter is named Madeline Julia after our daughter. So, we have a wonderful family, and we're very, very grateful for our family.
Yeah, I'm just sending you guys lots of good vibes and sending everyone really in the world lots of good vibes. So I have one more question, and then I'm sure Elena is bursting with a lot of questions because not only has she just heard you tell this incredible story, but she's even taken your course online, which I haven't, by the way. Vic has a course online on Coursera and very popular, and I do want to talk a little bit about it, and maybe Vic, you can talk a little bit about it at one point. And also has a book called Life on Purpose, which I highly recommend. One more question to you, Vic, before we turn to Elena. And my question to you is this. I imagine that a lot of people who have heard your story come up to you and share their own stories with you.
Yes.
Okay, so, and maybe you have some research on this as well. I just want to hear from you. What is the proportion of people, do you think, out there in the world who have had traumatic, tragic experiences? And, at some level it becomes subjective, right? I mean, somebody losing a job, it's not in my book anywhere close to what happened to you, but for them it could be subjectively just as tragic. I mean, right now, the COVID pandemic, I actually have a friend who's going through a nervous breakdown because of the pandemic.
Very hard right now.
Yeah. So
I think that if you're a human being, that things happen to you. Part of life is tragedy. It's difficult times. It may be the loss of a loved one, but it also may be the loss of a job. It may be, not getting into medical school. It may be so many different things. And we all go through these life stages where there are difficult facets of that. And so I would say that suffering is human. The Buddha talked about how suffering is indeed human. We all suffer in some ways. And I don't like to rank order my suffering or difficult time versus anybody else. I was trying to figure this out. I've given talks now to well over 100,000 people in the last 10 years around the world. And every talk I give, people come up and tell me their stories. And there are so many stories that are much more horrific than mine. We knew that Julia was, very likely going to pass away. So we had the opportunity to cherish her life every single day, live every day as if it may be the last day. And then we started living our days as if our days might be the last days. And in a way, death, the Grim Reaper, brings this shadow that makes life much more vivid and much more real and enjoyable. And when Julia got her transplant, it almost felt like our black and white lives. Oh, I'll get tenure as a professor, I'll play more golf, and I'll publish more articles, maybe write a book. That was like a black and white life. Now I live Technicolor life. My life is so much bigger and richer and filled with gratitude and love and connections that are deeper than I ever felt before. And then when Julia passed away, getting through that and getting to the other side made my life that much more richer. And I thank Julia for that, really. So everybody has those opportunities, I think, to move from a black and white life where everything is just kind of bland. And those kind of people often are worried about death. They're scared of death. They're going, oh, I hope I live to 150. Why? You're almost dead now. I mean, really. And 2,000 years ago, a poet named Lucretius talked about that. He said, why do you worry about death? You're dead now. Why are you worried about this? And I totally agree. Mark Twain once said, I'm not worried about dying. I'm really worried about not living.
Yeah.
And so even Steve Jobs knew he was dying in 2005 of pancreatic cancer, and he was giving the commencement address at Stanford University, and he said, death is the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. And it's an odd thing to think about, but the idea of accepting the fact that we will all die, not being afraid of that, but at the same time saying, well, I don't want to die because I have a lot to do in my life. I have a purpose in my life, or set of purposes. I have goals around things that matter a lot in my life. Then suddenly your life is really big. And actually, in a way, you're less likely to die. We know that.
Wow. Okay. Over to you, Elena.
Well, I see that we have many questions about the purpose of life and how to find it. I think we can leave them for later because, but guys, just in case, I recommend you to join the course. You can find all these answers in Vic's course about purpose and meaning in life.
Right.
And so I wanted to ask you a question, Vic. Actually, this question I had while I was studying and taking your course.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that purpose is something that we have to define for ourselves, invented for us? Or do you think this is something that is given from above, like from the universe, from God, and we just need tools to like find it ourselves or uncover it, discover it? Because if this is so, I also was thinking about the purpose of life. And again, if you don't want to answer, you don't need to answer this question about your daughter's purpose of life. So it was a short life. So what do you think if this is something given from above? So what was the reason for her to survive? Let's say, what kind of life was meant for her? Because I also actually survived an accident when I was a very small child, and I'm always thinking about that. If I was given a chance to survive, so maybe that's for something, for a reason. But then if I die tomorrow, I feel kind of I haven't really still done everything that I want to do. And so then I would think, what was the purpose of me surviving back then if I'm gonna die tomorrow and I still have so many things that I want to do?
Gosh, I love that question, Elena, and thank you for that carefully considered question. And it's the one question I don't have an answer to, honestly. I don't know whether our purposes are given to us and just need to be uncovered. The Greeks believe that. The Greeks believe that we were born with this inner God, this daemon inside us. Daemon is your true self or godlike self in Greek. And so they believed in what's called eudaimonia, where the word daemon is embedded in that. And eudaimonic well-being means being in touch with that inner God. In Hinduism, Raj, are you Hindu?
Yeah, I consider myself somewhat not religious, but
Yeah.
to pick a religion, I would say Hinduism.
But in Hinduism, there's this Atman. The Atman is this God that we're born with. I was in Bali, and when I was in Bali, my wife and I asked for a Hindu priest to teach us more about Hinduism while we were there. And so he took us to all these places. And while we're driving, he was saying, people who are Christian believe that they're born with sin, original sin. It's called that. And that it takes the society to educate that out of you or beat that out of you in some cases, depending on, the kind of upbringing you had. Whereas we believe that we were born with this godlike self called the Atman. And it's up to society to make sure that Atman is still flourishing, is still growing and that you can still be in touch with it. Well, that's really interesting. So the idea of uncovering this true godlike self is amazing. And you also see there's two very different philosophical perspectives of how to grow up, between growing up as a Christian versus growing up Hindu or Buddhist. But I personally am agnostic, and I'm a fierce agnostic. I don't believe agnostics are just fence sitters who can't make up their mind. I believe that I actually do not have the capability, any more than an ant has a capability, of understanding the universe and what's really happening. We could be living in a big laboratory, and there could be aliens that are manipulating us, and we might even call those aliens gods, who knows? And it could be that this alien said, I think I'm going to take that child away from Vic to study that in an experiment. And no one gave me a human subject's consent form, by the way, for that. But who knows? I have no clue what's going on in this universe. And the more we understand the universe from a physics perspective, the more we know we don't know and can't even know. There are now known over 100 billion stars in our galaxy. There are now known over 100 billion galaxies in the known universe, and we don't even know most of the universe. We don't understand this. There are things that we cannot comprehend, and because our brains don't even allow us to do that. Our monkey brains don't allow us to figure that out. So I am a fierce agnostic, meaning I'm not an atheist, because I think atheism, personally, this is my personal opinion, I think atheism is a belief. And my atheist friends hate it when I say that, by the way. So I expect to get nasty comments from that. That's fine. And then but just like a religious belief, I think that saying there is no God is also a belief. I don't know what to believe. Yeah. And that makes me an agnostic, and I'm quite honestly fiercely agnostic, a fierce fence sitter. So I don't know whether a purpose is uncovered in us, because that would suggest that there is some type of godlike being or beings that have given this to us. There is one thing, though, that we know that we are born with, and this comes from science, that we're born typically with a transcending nature. We are born to be empathic, to be good to other people. And this comes from evolution, actually. We know that even rats, there's a wonderful study, I think it's in my MOOC, maybe it's not, but in this study, they put a rat inside a cage, and within the plexiglass cage, there was another little plexiglass, clear glass cage that they would put another rat in. And that outer rat in the cage could open the door and allow this other rat to come out. And this other rat almost all the time would open the door because they love to play. Rats like to play, and they would have a good time. But then they put food on the outer cage, and they put these chocolate chips, and rats love chocolate chips. So they were thinking, well, maybe the rat won't open the cage anymore, because then the rat would have to share the chocolate chips. They did just as much. They opened the cage. Wow. They shared. Bonobos, whales, elephants, rats, I could go on and on, they are empathic. They help other animals. They help their fellow animals. Little babies, even 14 months old, will reach for a toy or reach for a glass to help another baby who is trying to reach that and can't. It's only after we socialize these babies that they become selfish. And so I would say that a transcending purpose may be born into us, and maybe our own society makes that go away. That's a very long-winded answer. There's another part of it, even to make it more long-winded, that I believe that we need to come up with our own purposes. And this is something that Friedrich Nietzsche talked about in the 1800s. He said, we should not allow society or religion, governments, our communities, our parents, or other people to dictate what our purposes should be. So we should build that ourselves. And then he asked, well, how should we do that? How do we build our purpose? And basically, he said, you need to be educated. He uses this metaphor, as I use in my class, Elena, of a camel. And he said, at the very beginning of his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche has this beautiful metaphor of a camel. And the camel says, put everything on my back, on my shoulders, all the suffering of the world, all the beauty of the world, educate me completely, not just through a classroom setting, but in the real world. I want to understand what poverty is, what suffering, what illness is, but also what love and beauty are. And once the camel is fully educated, the camel transforms, metamorphosizes into a lion. The lion goes into the wilderness and finds this dragon. And on every scale of the dragon are the words, thou shalt. In other words, the dragon is society. The dragon is religion. The dragon is our parents. The dragon is saying, you shalt do this. You shalt have this purpose. The lion slays the dragon. And then the lion metamorphosizes one last time into a child, an innocent, who just says, I want to learn without anybody's influence. Now, I think that's pretty much impossible. But I love that metaphor because I view my students as camels, not lions yet, but as camels. And I view my role is to help create lions who can go out and say, I'm going to tear up the resume that my parents wrote for me, when I go into college. So many of my students come in going, well, I'm here to be a doctor. Why do you want to be a doctor? Well, my parents wanted me to be a doctor since I was 2 years old. Or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a business person, or I want to be this or that. And, it's usually what their parents wanted them to do, or their society wanted them to do. I say, tear that up for now and take a gap year. Go out and learn in the real world and read and learn, and then take some classes too. Go back and forth. So I I don't see why people just spend 4 years in college. I love the idea of 6 years in college, going back and forth into the real world, volunteering, meeting people who are not like you. And then coming back, and then you're really ready to decide, yes, I want to be a doctor for all the right reasons. And once you have that why, once you have that purpose, you're more likely to get into medical school. You're more likely to be successful as a business person or a lawyer or anything else. Does that make sense, Elena?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
So I don't think purposes are necessarily uncovered. I think we develop them as we design our lives.
Okay.
Could I ask one more question, Raj?
Yeah,
we're long-winded next time.
Sorry, we're at 10:35. I just want to be cognizant of the time, and I do think that we have another 5 minutes before we bring Gayatri up, and she can ask questions. That the comments section has been really active, so I don't want to be distracted by it. But lots of comments, lots of questions. And by the way, guys, if you feel like it, if you want to share a little bit about whether you've had a traumatic, tragic event in your life and that's led you to find purpose. You don't have to tell us what the event was, anything, but just say, yes, I've had something happen to me in my life that I would consider to be a traumatic event. And it did lead me to finding some semblance of purpose in my life. I'd love to see that. Okay. And if you haven't had any tragic event, good for you. You've had a really lucky life so far. And really, all the best to you that it continues that way. Please share that as well with us. Okay. Back to you, Elena. What was your question or comment?
Vic, I also, when I started your course, I thought, okay, there's probably one purpose in life, like you just define it probably for the rest of your life. Yeah. And then when I joined forums, I saw a lot of people, because you have to introduce yourself. So I read some stories, and there are a lot of people who are retired. And at first I was surprised, haven't these people already decided, haven't they made up their mind what they want to do in life? And then I realized that it's so important to redefine it with time. So it could be, your purpose for some years of your life. And then especially if your purpose is to create, to raise kids, and then your kids marry and they they leave the house, you need to find another purpose for your life. And so then I understood why there are so many people who were retired and were searching for a new purpose in their life. And so I think that it's like, we don't really think about that very often, right? We just think one purpose, and I need to find that purpose, but we constantly need to work on that to redefine, to see if that purpose still makes sense for us, right?
It would be a lot of pressure if you just had to come up with one purpose for your entire life. I love the idea of having adolescents start to think about purpose in their lives. And all we mean by purpose is a goal or set of goals around things that matter most in our lives. And that's all we're doing then. We're focusing on those goals and focusing less on the extraneous junk that's in our world now. We have so much junk through social media or horrible television or whatever, so many distractions that we have nowadays in our lives that we have a hard time thinking about and then focusing on the things that matter most.
So sorry, can you just repeat what the definition of purpose is?
So a goal or set of goals around the things that matter most in our lives. So we set goals all the time. We might have a checklist this weekend saying, well, I need to do the laundry and I need to shop for food. And and we'll check those off. And isn't it nice when you check that off? You go, nice. And that's goal setting is very rewarding. If I'm swimming underwater, I might say, I'm going to swim as far underwater as I can. Or I might say, I'm going to try to touch the other side of the swimming pool. And if I do that, I'll swim further, right? And I might be more exhausted, but I'll feel better. I might not even touch the other side, but I know I will have swum farther. So that's what I mean by a goal or set of goals. Teaching people at a young age about setting goals around what matters most and thinking about what matters most is a really important thing. And I view it as concentric rings in a tree. If you could build a young person's life with a strong inner core around what matters most, they'll start designing their life then over time around new things, like when they find a partner, maybe they get married, maybe they then have children, maybe they get a job, maybe they then get sick, maybe they lose a loved one, maybe they get a promotion, maybe they retire. All of those times, and you could think of many, many more, all of those life events are times when you may need to repurpose your life or tweak your purpose or add a component of purpose in. And so that's what And I think that the stronger your core is, which is why educating college students to me is so important. Having that core means that when something bad does happen, it means that you have a strong core, you have a strong tree, and you understand. One person likened the loss of a loved one to having if you're a tree on the side of a mountain and a boulder comes rolling down and smashes into that tree, doesn't kill the tree, but the tree it's all gnarled up, and the tree starts growing around the boulder. The tree no longer looks as beautiful as the other trees in a way, but is far more interesting. It has this amazing connection to, and is stronger than ever, being wrapped around this boulder. The boulder never goes away. And yet the tree has much more character, almost like a bonsai tree, if you're familiar with that. So I think that's one of the most beautiful metaphors for loss. But it also means that your core of your tree has to be very strong. And so that's why I think that thinking about purpose at a young age is great, but at all ages. We know that people who can't repurpose their life at retirement are 2.4 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease 7 years later.
So Vic, a quick question, and this is again kind of a personal question, but we are dealing with personal issues here. You obviously had a strong core when that boulder hit you. Would you say?
I think so. Yeah.
It's strong enough for you to withstand it. I mean, you were going down a bad path with over drinking and all that, but somehow something intervened.
I believe so. Yeah, because I've known many people who have not been able to survive that. And I was fortunate. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I had a job that allowed me to take off and go to Northern Michigan and read Rumi and Aristotle and the latest science, and even change the course of my science, my research, to start putting people into MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, and studying their brains while they're thinking about their purpose. And, I'm able to do that. I'm so lucky in a way that I can take this idea and turn it into a deeper science and meet other amazing scientists as a result.
So I have a follow-up question, which is, again, it's going to come across badly, I think, the way that I'm thinking about phrasing it, but the intent is to get to, I think, a nugget there that is in there somewhere. And here's the kind of somewhat blunt question, right? Imagine two lives. A Vic Strecher who had a healthy daughter who never passed away, and that is one life, and the life that you actually had. Between these two lives, if you were to go back in time, which life would you choose?
Yeah, that's an easy one. I would always pick the life that has my daughter in it. I never wanted my daughter to die, and yet we are left with the kind of lives we're given. I have no choice in this. So, given that fact, I have a choice. I had a choice 2 miles out on Lake Michigan to go one way or another. I think we all have choice of how to live our lives, no matter what happens to us. Seneca, an ancient Stoic philosopher, was a slave for a while. He said, I have a choice of how I can act, even as a slave, of what I can think. No one can take this away from me, what goes on in my head. I have that choice. And so I believe that we do have that opportunity to see, to act, and to think in a way that we want to think. And I think that's really important. Even if we don't, even if physics shows us that we're all predetermined, philosophers say it's probably best to think that you do have choice, isn't it? So for me, it's really critical that I believe I have agency or choice and some degree of control in my life.
Good, wonderful. All right, I think it is time that we actually pass time that we bring Gayatri up. It doesn't mean that we can't continue.
I hope this is making sense. I'm hoping I'm not just blabbing too much.
No. This is just, wonderful. I do think, I'm tempted to say that we'd love to have you on again, Vic, because there's so much.
This is fun.
Yeah, there's just a lot of comments too. So Gayatri, I don't know if you've been looking at the comments, and I know the conversation is so engrossing that it's I completely understand if you. Okay, so why don't you just ask whatever questions you have?
Yeah. A very interesting question here. It's from an anonymous learner. So this person asks, how do we know if we have chosen the right purpose, and does it dilute things too much if we select more than one purpose? having to do with career and one having to do with family?
Well, first of all, I love the question because we all have different domains of purpose. So we all have multiple goals, don't we? I mean, we typically have personal or family purposes and goals. We have maybe community purposes and goals, or maybe causes we really believe in. And we often have work purpose and work goals. Certainly, a lot of people find their identity through their work, and they're able to craft meaning and craft purpose out of their work that they have, which is wonderful. Increasingly difficult, by the way, now, isn't it? When you're not having coffee and you're sharing with your coworkers. In fact, just before this meeting, I was with my coworkers at Kumano, and I was saying, and they're all working from home, and they have been since February. I don't have anyone going into work. And I said, I know this is hard because you may wonder now, you're just left with the work. You're not left with those times you get to share socially with people. So you're left with the work, and you may go, does my work matter? And then you may even go, do I matter? It's really important. But yes, we do have different domains of purpose. And that leads to some conflict, doesn't it? So we may have 9 meetings at work, and for me, it might be writing a journal article or meeting with students or meeting with colleagues at Kumano or whatever it is. And then I would get home, and I'm so tired, all I want is a glass of wine, or a cocktail, and to read my 200 email messages that I've missed. And then my wife might come up to me and go, well, you're not here, Vic. And I'll go, well, I am too here. I'm not at work. And no, you're not here. You're not with the kids. You're not with me. And you have to say, you're right. You're right. So what do you do? And I used to think this is a matter of time. I just need more time, but I still have 6 hours at home before I go to sleep, before I go to bed. So I have plenty of time. I just have no energy. So I think, how do I manage multiple purposes in my life? And so I spent a lot of time in the last 10 years thinking and studying, what are the behaviors that give you more energy and vitality so you can have multiple purposes in your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there are 5 that I've come up with, and I call them SPACE. Sleep. So sleeping really gives you more energy, and understanding how to sleep well. There's a whole science to this. Present or mindfulness. So I meditate. And there are over 200 forms of meditation, but I meditate, and I don't allow myself a cocktail at the end of the day until I've meditated. So I am a great meditator. So I try to meditate. So presence is very important, being very present in here and now. Activity, that's the A in space. So being physically active. I did a mountain bike ride of 10 miles this morning before this. And I think it's very important. I do that almost every day. And this afternoon, I'll take a long walk. So, and then creativity. We know if we had everybody in this room, in this big Facebook room, writing a haiku now. Let's say they were going to write a haiku around what they thought about this interaction. They would have more energy afterwards. They'd have more vitality because they were creating something. So creativity gives you more energy. Even going to a museum or listening to jazz music or something gives you more energy. And then finally, eating. Eating well is the E in space. So really, there are all sorts of ways to eat that give you more energy. In particular, not eating huge, heavy meals, but eating more lightly. Vegan and vegetarian meals give you more energy overall, give you more vitality, and Hindus and Buddhists have known that for centuries. So this idea of giving yourself space so that you can achieve multiple purposes in multiple domains is very important. Does that make sense?
It's beautiful. Yeah. Not only did you say that you could have multiple purposes, I think maybe you're even saying that is actually desirable.
I think it is.
Yeah, and you've also given us a recipe for how to have the energy. It's really a problem of energy rather than time to pursue those multiple purposes.
Thank you for saying that, Raj, that we probably need more than one purpose. Dexter Gordon is a famous jazz saxophone player, and he was one of the leading saxophonists during the bebop jazz era of the 50s and 60s. And he was once asked, what's your purpose? And he said, to be the jazz saxophonist. And so, but you have to ask then what happened when John Coltrane came up, because suddenly John Coltrane was probably a better jazz saxophonist. Like, what happens to the person whose whole life is wrapped around one thing? I want to, be a doctor, or I want to do this, I want to be rich, or whatever. Those things, whatever happens, then when it doesn't happen, or when somebody does something better, imagine what happens to your identity. It's important to have multiple purposes.
Vic, sorry, could you please repeat just word for word space, because people are asking about P?
Yeah, for space, I mean sleep.
Hang on, Vic. I'm going to try and type it, okay?
Oh, great.
Remember.
Sleep,
peace,
presence,
activity,
creativity.
It's creativity. Don't say it. I'm trying to.
Oh, you're trying to do it.
Yeah. Creativity and eating.
Right.
All right. So I put in, by mistake, 3 E's in the sleep, but that's because I like to sleep, I think.
I do too, actually. And, in my book, Life on Purpose, I have a separate chapter for every one of those space activities, because there's a lot of science now around what you can do to give yourself more vitality. And some people who reviewed the book criticized the book, saying, well, that part felt more like it was a self-help book, or around, done by a health educator or a doctor. And I said, it's only to have more vitality so that you can achieve your purpose. It's not just about having purpose in your life. It's about being purposeful. How do I take the things that matter most and set goals to them, and work on my family more, work on teaching my students? If I teach every one of my students as if they're my own daughter, that's a lot of students. I have 200 students. On my online course now, I have almost 50,000 students, and it's growing fast. So how can you do that? You need energy, you need vitality, and to do that, you need to think about these basic health behaviors: sleep, presence, activity, creativity, and eating. Did I give myself space today, is what I like to ask.
All right, guys, so you have another question. In the meanwhile, I want to slip in one really quickly, and this is going to be, again, kind of a somewhat blunt question. What do you think of recreational drugs? Marijuana? I mean, what do you think of ayahuasca?
Yeah, interesting drug. I have not taken ayahuasca. I have some friends who have taken ayahuasca, and I have one friend who took ayahuasca and actually saw a relative who had died. Her husband had died, and she saw her husband in this trip that he was on. And I thought very seriously about an ayahuasca trip, taking it, bringing a Peruvian shaman up and sitting around a room of people and, taking ayahuasca and barfing, throwing up, and then suddenly you start seeing God or seeing Julia or whatever. I'm not a big drug taker. I have not. I don't like being fully out of control, and personally, but I do think that there are barriers that we have in our brain. There are probably doors that are shut in our mind that don't open up naturally. And it's possible that LSD, for example, and ayahuasca and some other drugs, mescaline, may open some of these doors to consciousness that we don't understand. Aldous Huxley wrote a lot about this. He wrote a lot about transcendence, and he's the one who wrote Brave New World, but brilliant.
And doors of perception too, I think.
Doors of perception. And doors of perception. He talked about this, and actually when he died, he asked his wife to inject him with LSD. So he literally was tripping as he was dying because he wanted to transcend to nirvana, and he thought this might help him transcend to nirvana as he was dying. Who knows? What I heard, I have a friend, Dean Ornish, who is Steve Jobs' doctor. He is, and Dean is.
I actually met him. He came down to Austin.
But that's right. In fact, he went to Austin. He went to the University of Texas. He's a very good friend of mine, and he told me that Steve Jobs' last words were, "Oh wow, oh wow."
My goodness.
As if he was seeing something that was unbelievable. And So who knows? Again, I'm agnostic about these things, and maybe I should. I'll ask you, Raj. Have you experimented?
Yeah, I've explored, and it's a big topic. We have like 5 minutes away. I do want to mention that I in my experience, they do open doors of perception.
Does it?
And I'm not a big user, but again, not everything, not cocaine, not heroin,
Right.
but really psilocybin, which is mushrooms.
Yeah, right.
Marijuana, which is more recreational, but I do think that it serves some useful purposes and opening up doors of perception, as you put it. I've not tried ayahuasca. I was going to, then COVID hit. I was going to go to Costa Rica.
Yeah. Well, when you do, give me a call. Maybe I'll think about this.
Yeah, maybe we can go together. Maybe we can organize a trip around this. No pun intended.
Are
Are you there, Elena?
Yeah, I'm here right now in Lima.
Yeah, she's in Paris.
Join us.
I've never done ayahuasca, but I could just accompany you so that you feel safe,
Oh, you're very kind. Where do you live, Elena?
Where? In Lima.
In Lima? Lima, Peru?
Yeah.
Really? Are you?
Yeah. No, I'm not. I'm from Belarus, but I'm currently living here. Actually, for 6 years already.
Okay, well, when I mentioned a Peruvian shaman, I didn't know you lived in Peru, but that is where people are taking ayahuasca. So that's awesome. Okay, we'll be in touch.
And by the way, guys, I mean, your opinions on this thing, go ahead, good, bad, the ugly. If you're completely against this, that's fine too.
But it's your life, it's your life to do what you want, to explore. We only have this one life, in my opinion. And why are we sitting around doing stupid things in it? Why are we spending all our time on Facebook? Why are we watching what Kim Kardashian is wearing? Who cares? Why aren't we thinking about our own lives and doing something big with those lives? Because it's not practice. This is a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Gayatri, do you have another question?
Yes, very interesting question here. It's from Siddesh, and he says, as I age, I've found that relatives, colleagues at work, and neighbors are more toxic than ever, which wasn't the case when I was a child. What has contributed to this? Greed for money? How to handle such people?
Yeah, you know what? There's a survey that's done of college freshmen by UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, every year of college freshmen. And they've done it since the 1960s. And they've asked, what's important to you? What's very, very important to you? And two questions they've studied for a long time. One is finding a philosophy of my life. And the other is being incredibly wealthy. And in the 1960s and 70s, philosophy was about twice as important as making money. Now it's completely flipped. Now college freshmen are so much more interested in becoming wealthy than finding a philosophy of their life. But if you study, there's a Healthy Mind survey now that's been done for 15 years. If you study over the last 10 years, depression, it's doubled among college students, doubled. Suicidal ideation has doubled. And purpose in life has gone down. And purpose is directly related to suicidal ideation, lack of purpose, to suicidal ideation. The question, have you thought about ending your life in the next 12 months? Or in the last 12 months, have you thought about ending your life? And depression, looking at severe depression, students are in great need of purpose in their lives, and to learn how to find purpose, to learn how to design their lives. And that's what my online course is about. It really is intended to help, not to tell you what your purpose is, but help you find and think more about that purpose in your life, and then to live purposefully. That's so important. So thank you for that question.
Awesome. We are only 2 minutes away, so maybe we can get in one more question. And but before I ask Gayatri to ask a question to you, Vic, would you at all mind coming back on the show? I would also mention this.
You guys are awesome. I love this Facebook connection where we've got the four of us here on the screen. I love the fact that there are three people asking questions. It's a lot of fun. It's a neat format. So way to go.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody, I'm seeing a lot of positive comments, and people want you for the second time, for the second session. And I see people commenting, and I'm sure they must be feeling the same that I felt when I was doing your online course. I guess
You're
that, right?
absolutely right, Elena. I mean, I was wondering how you can decide that somebody's kind by taking a course or, looking at them. By the way, there's some studies on it's called thin slice judgments, where you make judgments of other people in 3 seconds or less. And those turned out to be pretty accurate. So I kind of knew where you were coming from. And I have to say that the first time I looked at Vic too, I got the vibe that he was a kind and deep individual, and that's just been confirmed by not just the kind of content of your answers, Vic, but also the way that you've articulated them, and you said sometime back, you were worried you were blabbing, and I saw somebody say not at all, and I totally agree, not at all. Everything that he said was exactly right, and had, every word was carefully chosen, I felt, because you're coming from a place of, compassion and all that. And so, you can't, you whatever you say is it.
I hear people saying that they could listen to you all day long. And also I feel like we're sharing a lot of sincerity here. It's very sincere, heartfelt, like it's very special.
May I close with something that I feel that is especially relevant during COVID-19?
Sure.
Right now, I think we have an opportunity to project ourselves a year into the future, where we might ask ourselves, a year in the future, will we be able to look back and say, I discovered strengths about myself that I didn't know I had. I have found a new path or paths that I didn't know I was going to go on. I discovered things that matter most to me that I didn't think mattered before. If you can, then you're going to grow from this difficult experience that we're all going through. But people who have gone through earthquakes, through tsunamis, through the loss of loved ones, through cancer, through many, many other difficult times, often end up with post-traumatic growth rather than post-traumatic stress. We have an opportunity to grow from this experience in many ways, as a society, as governments, as families, and importantly, as individuals. We can do better. We can become better people right now. And so I hope that, as Jonas Salk, who developed the polio vaccine, said, we need to be good ancestors. So a year from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, can we look back? Can our progeny look back and say, they were really great ancestors? So maybe we can all strive to be good ancestors. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Vic. Thank you very much. And on that note, guys, I think we're going to have to end it because we are past time. It's 11:02. Thank you, Gayatri, so much for playing this very difficult role of fielding the audience questions here.
That was great. Thank you.
And you could only choose two. But so I just want to very quickly say that next week we're going to have Ruud van Hoven. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a researcher from the Netherlands, which Vic, you mentioned, you had visited. And one of the kind of, first original guys, researchers interested in happiness. And he does a lot of country level happiness. So that's what is coming up next week. And hopefully, I was going to end after that for a whole month at least, and just take a break from Happy Smarts Happy Hour. We'll come back with Kristen Neff. She's agreed to come back in September. But now that Vic has said yes to coming back a second time, we'll just see if he can come back 2 Fridays from now, 2 weeks from now. Okay. I'm just putting the thought out there and setting that intention. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Thank you again very much.
Bye. Bye, Elena.
Bye-bye.